I didn't expect the box to be small. After a funeral, people hand you casseroles and sympathy cards that try too hard, not a palm-sized cedar box that smells faintly like salt and old churches. Mr. Whitlow, the local attorney who has helped half of Beaufort sign things they don't understand, set it on the corner of his desk with 2 fingertips, like it might spook and bolt. "For when you're ready," he said, and then made a point of looking out the window at the live oaks so I wouldn't have to cry in front of him. Inside was a single key, the color of old copper roofs, green, pretty in a stubborn way, and a scrap of paper torn from the corner of a yellow legal pad. 7 words in Cole's blocky handwriting: Marsh Key. Only when you're ready. It's a strange thing, how grief talks. Sometimes it wails, sometimes it bargains, sometimes it whispers in a voice that sounds exactly like your husband asking you to be brave. My fingers closed around the key, and I swear I heard a buoy bell carry across the water, even with all that glass and carpet between me and the tide. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the Low Country does that to all of us, ringing through whatever is left open. Mr. Whitlow slid a manila folder toward me, death certificates, tax forms, the dull paperwork of endings, and I nodded like a person who knows what they're doing. I tucked the cedar box into my tote, thanked him, and practiced not falling apart as I walked through the lobby. The parking lot was bright enough to make me squint. That's where Trevor leaned against my car door like he'd been posed there by a bad idea. Cole's half-brother. The kind of man who smells like cologne and plans. He gave me a smile that never reached his eyes. "Mara," he said, drawing my name out like he owned the vowels. "We should talk. Family to family." "I just buried my husband," I said. Half apology, half reminder. "And I loved him too," Trevor replied so quickly it felt rehearsed. "Listen, the cottage out on the marsh? I know it was special to him. You don't need to deal with maintaining a place like that alone. There are people who can help. I can coordinate. I've already called a property inspection. Just a formality." A wave of heat rolled up my neck. "What cottage?" He blinked, like a stage cue had been missed. "The guest place. Marsh Key." Cole and I discussed a plan. He didn't want you overwhelmed. I could feel the key through the canvas of my tote, heavy and cool against my hip. "What plan?" Trevor's eyes flicked to the rear-view mirror of his shiny SUV, then back. "We'll go over it. No need to stress. If a signature is needed, we'll make it painless. I'll text you the time." "Absolute." He tapped the roof of my car like a foreman dismissing a crew and strolled away, already on his phone, already narrating me as a problem he'd solved. I sat in the driver's seat and rested my forehead on the wheel. For a few seconds, the world narrowed to the smell of leather and the sound of my own breath. The buoy bell, imagined or not, seemed to swing again, dull and insistent, like a clock in a room you forgot you were in. I pulled the key from the box and laid it on my palm. The shaft was nicked, the bow engraved with 3 tiny words, almost lost under the patina. Steady, verify, sign. Cole never wasted words. He also didn't keep secrets, or so I'd believed. Yet here I was, with a cemetery bouquet on my passenger seat and a stranger's confidence in my parking lot, and a green key that hummed with the kind of invitation that scares you into truth. I drove home the long way, under the canopy of Spanish moss, where the air tastes like ocean and stories. I kept touching the key and then pulling my hand back, like it might spark. By the time I turned onto my street, I'd decided 2 things. First, grief can sit in the front seat if it needs to, but it doesn't get to drive. Second, I would go to Marsh Key when I was ready, which, embarrassingly, felt a lot like now. My phone buzzed with a new text before I could cut the engine. A number I didn't recognize. Property inspection confirmed for Friday 10 a.m. Please have homeowner present to sign access agreement. No greeting, no name. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I looked down at the key again, green as sea glass, patient as a door I hadn't opened yet. Why would Cole leave me a way in and someone else the audacity to act like it was theirs? The road to Marsh Key is the kind that dares you to keep going 2 lanes, then 1, then a ribbon of asphalt raised just enough above the marsh to make you feel like you're driving on the back of a sleeping alligator. I rolled the window down and let the salt air slap me awake. Grief is heavy, but brine is louder. Somewhere out past the Spartina grass, a buoy bell found its rhythm and, for the first time in days, my lungs remembered how to work. The cottage showed itself the way shy people do at an angle. Cedar shakes the color of wet tea, a porch that wrapped around like arms, windows that remembered to face the light. Cole used to tease me that I could spot good light from a moving car. He wasn't wrong. Even from the steps I could tell whoever designed the place had paid attention to someone like me. Deep sills for books, a corner that begged for a chair and a blanket, the promise of a cross breeze that nets thoughts and keeps only the ones that matter. Inside smelled like lemon oil and Tide. No dust, no boxes. The quiet had the exact hum of electricity and intention. On the kitchen island, a glass jar sat half full of smooth sea glass greens and whites, one impossible cobalt shard that winked at me. Next to it, a laptop waited with a simple label on a strip of masking tape. Mara. The handwriting was Cole's careful block print, the same letters from grocery lists and notes tucked into lunch bags, the same letters that wrote me into the rest of his life. I touched the jar first, because it wasn't a demand, it was an invitation. The glass felt cool, old edges made kind by time. I fished out the blue piece and rolled it in my palm until it warmed, then slipped it into my pocket like a talisman. I told myself I was just sorting objects, taking an inventory, but we both know I was reaching for something to hold that wasn't sorrow. I walked the rooms like a librarian after hours, running my fingers along the built-in shelves, counting outlets, opening and closing the soft-closed drawers just to hear the hush. In the bedroom, the bed faced a window that faced the marsh. In the bathroom, the mirror was tilted so you could see daylight even with your head down. Everywhere I looked, tiny kindnesses. He had built a place that knew me, which is why the sound of my phone on the counter, the little aggressive ping of a new email, felt like a knock on a door I hadn't finished opening. The subject line was efficient and presumptuous, like Trevor in digital form. Property inspection Friday, 10 a.m. Access agreement. Required. The body of the email was all boxes and bolded words, a signature block from a company I'd never heard of, and no human name. Please have the homeowner present to sign. My face went hot. Who exactly had the right to schedule strangers to walk this floor and measure this air? I glanced around like the walls might answer. The cottage stayed polite. The jar of sea glass said nothing. On the laptop, another sticker peeked from the lid. A tiny buoy bell, barely an inch across. It made me smile in spite of myself. I didn't open the computer. Not yet. I wasn't ready to know the exact version of Cole, who had put this place together, how long ago, how secretly, how certain he'd been that I'd find my way here. I set my palm on the warm metal anyway, a hello to a voice I missed. Back on the porch, I leaned against the rail and watched a heron do her arrogant stalk through the shallows. The wind lifted my hair and salted my lips. For a moment I let myself pretend this was just a pretty Saturday with a house I could afford and nobody trying to turn my life into their spreadsheet. My phone chimed again. A second email, this one with urgent sign in the subject line, a PDF attached, and a deadline stamped in red. I laughed once, the kind of sound you make when a memory bumps into a boundary. I slid the blue sea glass deeper into my pocket until it pressed against the bone. I could love this place at first sight and still refuse to let someone else claim it on my behalf. Whoever put me on their calendar hadn't asked. Whoever sent this file thought speed could outrun sense. Who gave them permission to schedule my signature? By Thursday morning, the emails had multiplied like gnats. Friendly reminder, final notice, time sensitive, all saying the same thing in different fonts. Be home at 10, be ready to sign, be agreeable. I made coffee strong enough to walk on and drove into town because the cottage felt too beautiful to read threats in. Sienna spotted me the second I pushed through the diner door. She has that radar for people trying not to look rattled. "You're early," she said, sliding me a mug before I could ask. "And you've got your I'm fine face on." I told her about the inspection, the PDFs, the no-name signatures. She listened with her elbow on the counter and her chin in her hand, the way she used to when we were 17 and I was pretending my mother's apologies were choices. "What company?" she asked. I gave her the name from the email. She lifted an eyebrow. "Never heard of them. You want me to Google while you pretend to eat a biscuit?" I want someone to ask me first, I said, surprising myself with how sharp it came out. Her gaze flicked past my shoulder to the window. Then you're not going to love this. She nodded toward the parking lot. Trevor's SUV had that same just detailed shine, the kind that feels like a suit. He came in smiling big enough to show teeth and reached for a hug I ducked without ceremony. Mara, he said, palms raised like I'd pulled a weapon. Good, you're here. We can make this simple. Sienna took one polite step back, which is her way of giving you room to box. Trevor set a folder on the counter and fanned out papers the way a magician offers a deck. Bold headings, tabs, a signature line waiting like a trap. A family agreement, he said, soft-voiced. We keep the cottage in the Ellison Circle. Atlantic Crest Holdings helps us maximize value, while you, of course, retain the right to breathe, I said. Benefit, he corrected. Mara, this is what Cole wanted. He hated fuss. He didn't want you burdened by upkeep, taxes, all the red tape. I can handle the logistics. We just need your consent for access and preliminary improvements. I felt for the key in my pocket without meaning to. The metal was warm from my hand, the little engraved words pressed like a reminder into my skin. Steady, verify, sign. Who did you copy on the inspection email? I asked. Trevor's smile thinned. The property management company, their counsel. Miles will swing by to introduce himself. Who is Miles? A partner at Atlantic Crest, he said. And almost on cue, the bell over the door jingled, and a man in a salt-colored blazer with a tidy beard walked in, smelling like soap and money. Mara, he said, and somehow made my name feel like a handshake. Miles Caro, I'm sorry for your loss. We're not here to push. We're here to be useful. He laid a business card on the counter with 2 fingers, then didn't push it closer, which I noticed because most men like him do. We're neighbors in a sense. We value good stewardship. If we can support maintenance, permit renewals, storm prep, I can read a weather report, I said, gentler than I felt. We're not neighbors. You're a corporation. He laughed softly, like we were sharing a joke, and offered a kind of bow. Fair enough. Still, we've tentatively scheduled the inspection for tomorrow. There's a standard access agreement. Think of it as a hall pass for the professionals. In and out. You can revoke at any time. And if I don't sign? I said. Miles paused just enough to make it a moment. We'll reschedule, he said. But given construction windows and tidal constraints, delays cascade. He tipped his head toward the window where the river sits just out of view, like he could see the current from here. Sienna refilled my coffee without asking. As she reached across, she mouthed, "Careful." Then later, when she leaned to wipe an already clean patch of counter, she whispered, "A guy in a ball cap has been at the corner booth since you came in. He photographed the papers when Trevor opened them. Twice. I didn't look." I swallowed what suddenly felt like grit. "Trevor," I said, keeping my voice ordinary. "You scheduled strangers to enter a house you never told me existed and invited a company I didn't hire to help with things I didn't ask for. Why would I sign anything today?" "Because it's easier," he said, with that winning tone he uses on waiters and notaries. "And because Cole left me a key," I said, "not a calendar." Miles spread his hands. "Take your time, of course. We respect process. Perhaps just a preliminary signature to acknowledge intent? It protects everyone." By Dad. Outside, somewhere out on the water, a pile driver started its steady thud metal on earth, a pulse you could mistake for your own if you weren't careful. The sound walked through the glass and sat at our table. I gathered the papers into a neat stack and slid them back across the counter, careful not to let the corner catch my sleeve. The key bit gently into my palm, an anchor pretending to be jewelry. I put the business card in my pocket and left the folder where it was. "If not today," Trevor said lightly. "Then when?" I looked at him, then at Miles, then at the door where a shadow shifted in the corner booth. The buoy bell in my memory made one clean note. If I don't sign today, what exactly is going to happen all of a sudden? By sundown, the sky had that bruise-purple low-country gets before the tide turns, and my phone was still doing its needy little dance reminders, confirmations, as discussed, from people I had never discussed anything with. I made a sandwich I didn't taste and set the sea glass jar in the middle of the kitchen island like a friendly witness. When the knock came, it wasn't shy. 3 quick raps that said we're here already. There were 4 of them on the porch, 2 men in matching polos with clipboards, a woman with a tablet and a smile that belonged to a dental ad, and Deputy Ruiz, in a tan uniform with the patient eyes of a man who gets called into other people's messes. The taller polo announced himself like a headline. Evening. Property inspection. Will be in and out. I held the door the width of my forearm and practiced 3C in my head. Calm. Collect. Confirm. I'll need to see IDs and printed authority for entry, I said. Who requested this inspection? What is the statutory basis, and what's the defined scope? Clipboards blinked. The woman recovered first and turned her tablet for me to see a logo and a line that said consent on file. It's just access, ma'am. Preliminary. Nothing binding. Whose consent? A beat. Family representative. It's not now. That would be me, I said. And I haven't given any. Deputy Ruiz tipped his chin in a small nod that read, keep going. The taller polo tried a chuckle. This is standard process. So is getting it in writing, I said. Please email me the request with the authority and names of personnel. I'll respond in writing. I slid a card from my pocket with a fresh Gmail address printed in black ink. Addie, Patel told me to make a clean inbox for all of this, and there is something holy about a brand new inbox with 0 unread. Ruiz stepped forward, palms visible. Ma'am, I'm here to keep the peace. Nobody goes in without your permission. Folks, let's exchange cards and keep it on the porch. End archives. The woman's smile thinned but held. The polos produced badges on lanyards. I read every letter aloud like a teacher taking attendance and photographed them with my phone. Name, company, expiration, done. I opened the family incident log on my kitchen counter, wrote the date and time, the weather, the names, the stated purpose, the request, the response. My handwriting looked steadier than my pulse felt. Right on cue, my phone rang with Trevor on the screen. I hit speaker and set it face down. You're making this hard, Mara, he said. They're trying to help. You're escalating. Don't do this. People are concerned. He was no have to days. There it was, Darvo, in a neat little sequence. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. I kept my voice even. We're doing this by email, Trevor. Why are you being hostile? He asked, smooth as a lacquered floor. Cole left me a key, I said, not loud, not soft. No one crosses this threshold tonight. I tapped the log with my pen so the sound traveled into the mic. Put your requests in writing. The woman with the tablet tried again. If we can just peek at the foundation vents and the attic access. You can send a scope and I'll consider it, I said. You can also step back from my door. Those are my 2 offerings. Ruiz's mouth did a not quite smile. You heard the homeowner. We stood there breathing at each other for a few long seconds while the marsh did its endless, indifferent breathing behind them. Somewhere out past the Spartina, a buoy bell made one clear note. I reached for the jar and dropped in a new piece of glass, green, oval, heavy as a decision. The sound it made against the others was small and final. The polos retreated first, flipping their clipboards into neutral. The woman emailed herself my address, promised follow-up materials, and followed them down the steps with her good posture intact. Ruiz lingered, hat in hand. You did fine, he said quietly. If they come back without paper, call the non-emergency line and reference tonight's CAD. I'll log it, I said, and I meant it. He hesitated, thumb rubbing the edge of his citation book like there was something unpolished that needed telling. One more thing, ma'am. This may be nothing, but I'd want someone to tell my sister. Go on. A UCC 1 hit the county index this afternoon, he said. Filed under Ellison Family Trust, secured party name I recognize from development work. Collateral description lists fixtures and after acquired improvements at your Marsh Key address. I blinked. Is that a lien? It's a notice a lien might exist, he said, careful. Sometimes legitimate, sometimes used to spook folks into signing something, to clear it up. Your attorney will know what to do. My phone vibrated with a new email subject line in red, Access Agreement Final Draft. I didn't open it. I wrote UCC 1 notice filed. Do not sign to fix in the margin of my log until the ink almost bled through. What does a person do? I asked, mostly to myself, when strangers schedule her signature and then try to hang paper over her porch. Ruiz tipped his hat. She keeps doing exactly what you just did. Calm, paper, daylight. He started down the steps, then looked back. And she calls a lawyer in the morning. $2,000. I watched his taillights thread back toward the causeway, the cottage settling around me like a living thing. The sea glass jar glimmered in the kitchen light. My phone buzzed again, impatient. I set the key beside the log so the engraved words faced up where I could see them. If a filing I never authorized just landed on my life, what else did they put my name on today? At first light, the marsh looked like a lung exhale. Inhale flat and silver, then rippled with movement you can't see until you hear it. I was halfway through a second cup of coffee when Cap Reed knocked, knuckles like driftwood. He didn't waste time on condolences. We'd already done that at the dock months ago. He glanced past me at the sea glass jar and nodded once, like he approved of whatever spine it was giving me. "Show me your crawl space," he said, like he was asking for a wrench. "The what?" "Every decent cottage has one, and every decent man who sees a storm coming uses it. We found the hatch in the utility closet behind the water heater, a square cut so neat you'd miss it if you weren't looking for straight lines." Cap handed me his headlamp. "You first. Tide's low. If there's anything worth finding, now's your window." The smell was cool and earthen. The beam slid over brick piers and sandy ground, then pinged off something out of place. A waterproof storage box, duct-taped like a promise. The second my fingers closed around the handle, a buoy bell carried in clean and close, as if the sound had been waiting under the house for my hand. Inside the box, order masquerading as mess. Tide charts rubber-banded by season. Printouts of satellite images with handwritten notes in Cole's tidy block. Email threads with subject lines like Phase 2 stakeholder outreach and shoreline mitigation plan. A folded county plat with our parcel traced in red, the ink so confident it reminded me of his signature on birthday cards. On top of the stack, his handwriting on a torn sheet, "Do not sign before storm season. Let them feel the water first." I could feel my heart do a small, angry trick. "He knew," I said. "He knew they'd stampede." Cap crouched beside me, knees cracking. "Everyone gets brave on a sunny day," he said. "Paper looks different when wind's on it." We spread the documents on the kitchen table until the wood disappeared under creases and dates. Cap pointed with a knuckle to a notation I would have missed. Easement, 1,987 marsh access over Western Spur. Granted in perpetuity. Book 214, page 93. The line ran like a quiet river from our boundary to a sliver of county water, a right-of-way nobody had mentioned. The kind of sentence that changes fortunes. "What does it mean?" I asked, even though I could feel the answer in my skin. "It means you don't just have a pretty porch," Cap said. "You've got lawful water access, back when folks wrote these things so they couldn't be argued out of existence. If a resort needs that to connect their fancy plans, you're not a cottage to be folded in. You're a lock they can't pick." I traced the line with my finger, as if it might rinse me of uncertainty. In a separate folder, Cole had clipped 3 memos from a consultant. I didn't recognize valuation estimates with 2 columns, with access and without. The difference wasn't a rounding error, it was a life. There were photos, 2 grainy night shots of barges moving equipment through the channel, timestamps circled, printouts from the county's project calendar. A list of last year's hurricanes with arrows to dates. The developer went quiet. Cole had mapped not just the land, but the rhythm of the people who wanted it. I sat back hard enough that the chair complained. Shock is a loud room. It quieted as something practical took the wheel. He hadn't kept a secret to hide from me. He'd built a file, because he knew paper outlives noise. I picked up the memo again. Let them feel the water first. He wasn't being poetic. He was speaking logistics, leverage, law. The marsh was not decoration. It was jurisdiction. "Why would nobody mention an easement like this?" I asked. Cap snorted. "Because folks don't mention tools they intend to borrow." The tide turned. I heard it in the bones of the cottage, the way the underfloor damp shifted to cool. I slid the easement copy into a new sleeve, labeled it in thick black letters, then did the same for the valuation memos and tide charts. I made a stack that smelled like lemon oil and ink and purpose. While I worked, my phone hummed across the table, another email, another, as a courtesy. I didn't look. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote out what the documents were, where they came from, how they connected. Not prose, just clean lines and verbs. Found: access easement. Implication: control over water approach. Action: verify at county. Do not sign anything that touches access or fixtures. Cap watched me write and gave a short, satisfied grunt. That's the thing, Mara. You don't have to outshout them. You just have to outlast them with the right pages. It was nost. I tucked Cole's note under the lamp as if it were a commandment and gathered the rest into the binder I hadn't known I owned until it was in my hands. The buoy bell sounded again. Not a warning this time, but a metronome. One more printout slid free. As I closed the box, a calendar Cole had annotated with big red X's across the coming months, and next to them, a line in pencil. They file paper first. How did he know they'd try a UCC one before they even met my eyes? By mid-afternoon, my inbox looked like a parade that forgot where it was going. I forwarded everything to the clean address I'd made for this mess and called Maya Patel from the porch with the binder open on my knees. She picked up on the first ring, sounding like caffeine in courtrooms. "Start with the names," she said. "Then breathe." I read her the company on the inspection emails, the one Trevor kept calling Property Management. She hummed. "Spell the LLC," she said, and I did, one consonant at a time. I could hear keys moving on her end. A beat. Okay. That entity was formed 4 months ago. Registered Agent is a law firm that does bulk filings. Its principal address is, look at that, a suite Atlantic Crest Holdings uses for half its shells. So the independent inspection is their own? Looks that way. Also, more typing. Your UCC one? Filed by Ellison Family Trust. Secured party listed as a subsidiary lender I've seen parked under Atlantic Crest deals. Appointment of the trust's manager, signed by... Don't say his name, I said, even though I wanted to hear it. Trevor, she finished gently. No court order, no POA on file. He styled himself a manager of a thing that doesn't govern you, then pretended to perfect an interest in fixtures he has no present claim to. I stared at the marsh until the horizon steadied. English, please. It's theater, Maya said. Loud paper. It doesn't make a lean magic, but it scares reasonable people into clearing it with a signature. We'll file a correction and a notice disputing authority. Meanwhile, do not sign anything labeled access, consent, memorandum, or improvements. Those are doors they'll tell you are windows. The key was in my palm before I knew I'd reached for it. The tiny words on the bow pressed into my skin. Steady. Verify. Sign. They photographed papers at the diner, I said. Sienna saw it. Ask her to pull the footage, Maya said. Anything that shows Trevor coordinating, anyone from the company meeting off-site, timestamps. Also, you mentioned a water access easement. There's not now. I told her about the crawlspace box, the old book, and page, Cole's notes, the valuation memos with 2 columns, the way the red line on the plat felt like a vein. She went very quiet in that lawyer way that means a hinge has been located. Mara, she said, voice dropping half an octave, if your parcel holds a recorded access easement to navigable water, and if Atlantic Crest's Phase 2 depends on that corridor, then you are not just a homeowner. You are a choke point. Under our state's conservation and coastal management rules, they can't pretend you're optional. If you keep that easement intact, they either compensate appropriately or redesign. There is no ethical universe where they push you to sign blind, and there is a legal universe where they can't. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until the first part of it left. The sea glass jar caught a slant of light and flashed back at me like it was agreeing. So we don't have to outmuscle them, I said. Just hold the right line. Exactly, Maya said, and document while you do it. Send me scans of the easement and the memos. I'll verify the book and page at the county, pull the plat, and draft a letter to the developer and their vendor, prohibiting access pending verification and reminding them of your rights. We'll copy the county. Paper beats theater. Aided. When we hung up, I texted Sienna. She called instead. Already ahead of you, she said. I pulled the last 48 hours from the corner booth camera. Our guy in the ball cap? He's got Trevor on speaker the first time, then meets a foreman with a vest I've seen around the materials yard. They flip through a folder that looks an awful lot like the one you slid back across my counter. Timestamps, clear faces. I can export clips. Please, I said. And Sienna, thank you. You don't have to say that, she said. But say it again later after you win. I set the jar closer and dropped in a pale shard I'd found on the porch rail, listening for the small, sure sound of it finding its place. Inside, I scanned. Outside, clouds built a bruise over the water the way the sky does when it's remembering a storm. Every time a doubt tried to stand up, I read the easement line again like a sentence that didn't change when you blinked. Miles texted near dusk. Happy to reschedule for your convenience. We value good relationships. He attached a revised access agreement that wasn't materially different from the first, just friendlier fonts. I forwarded it to Maya without comment. Trevor texted 30 seconds later with no punctuation. Stop making this complicated, we have a timeline. I typed, deleted, typed again, then did what my new spine knew to do. I pasted my 3 rules at the top of a fresh email. Email only, paper only, daylight only. Then I added 1 sentence and sent it to both men. All requests must be in writing and will be reviewed by counsel. No one is authorized to enter the property or affix, inspect, or alter any fixture or improvement. The key left a crescent in my palm. I welcomed the sting. I reopened Cole's note. Let them feel the water first. For the first time since the cedar box, I understood how unpoetic he meant it. The marsh darkened 1 tone at a time until the windows held my reflection instead of the scenery. Somewhere in town, the courthouse clock would be striking the hour. In my head, it sounded like a gavel. If we hold the water, Maya had said, they have to come to the table under the rules that exist, not the ones they invent. Rain finds every seam in this county. By nightfall, it had stitched the marsh to the sky and the cottage to my bones, and the roof sang the steady song tin roofs know by heart. I turned off the lamps one by one until the rooms were shapes and the porch light drew a clean edge around the dark. The sea glass jar held a small moon of its own. The key lay beside my notebook where I'd left it face up like a compass. Steady, verify, sign. I made tea I didn't need and sat at the kitchen table with the little red light on my voice recorder winking. Log, June 10th, I said, and surprised myself with how formal it sounded. Weather, rain, southerly wind. Mood, brittle. I laughed once, a dry sound. I'm talking to a machine because when I talk to people I apologize before I've even said anything. The rain ratcheted up 1 notch, like it wanted to keep me honest. I looked at my hands. They're librarian hands, ink-stained, good at sorting, not famous for fists. My mother raised me to believe softness keeps a family from breaking. She apologized for my father's temper until the apologies became furniture, useful for propping things up that shouldn't stand. I have been my mother's daughter in ways I'm only now learning to name. If I'm honest, there's a relief in calling it what it is. I confuse silence with peace because silence is easier to manage than conflict. I'm tired, I told the recorder, and then said it again because the first time sounded like a performance. I'm tired of asking permission to live in my own life. The key was cool against my palm. I closed my fingers until the engraved words pressed a little crescent into my skin. Here is what's true, I said. Cole left me a place that knows me. He also left me a problem that wears a tie. I don't have to be loud to solve it. I have to be clear. Rain on the porch steps, rain in the gutters. A buoy bell somewhere out past the Spartina made a sound so soft it felt like something in me answering. I pulled a blank index card from the drawer and wrote boundary card at the top in block letters I learned from a man who didn't believe in flourishes. Under it, 3 lines, all caps, the kind of font you'd read in a storm. Email only. Paper only. Daylight only. I stared at the card until the ink dried. No signatures at thresholds, I said to the log. No conversations that can't be printed. No meetings without a son and a witness. No emergency that wasn't an emergency yesterday. My voice steadied with each sentence, like the words were planks over water. I thought about every time I'd apologize to end a moment faster. The way people like Trevor hear apologies as invitations. The way men like Miles perform patience until you mistake it for respect. I slid the index card into the front pocket of my notebook, a small white shield, and added a fourth line under the rule of threes because I wanted the reminder where it could glare back at me. My signature, my timeline. I picked up my pen and wrote the sentences I would need, not as speeches but as habits. Please put that in writing. I do not consent to entry. My counsel will reply. This conversation is over. I said each aloud into the room until the room learned them too. The kettle clicked off by itself. I didn't get up. I opened my email and typed a new message with my hands shaking anyway. The fear didn't leave. It just had to sit in the back row. To Miles Caro, all communications will be in writing. No access, inspection, affixation, or alteration is authorized. Any prior representations made by third parties are void as to me. To Trevor, see scheduling services or inspections. You have no authority to represent me or any trust that governs my property. Future contact by email only. To Deputy Ruiz, at the non-emergency address he'd given me. For your records, attempted access, 1910, names and IDs attached, no consent given, UCC 1 notice filed, counsel notified. I attached scans. I CC'd Maya. I proofread the subject lines like a student who plans to get the grade she wants. Then I pressed send. 1 message, 2, 3. Little whooshes that sounded like a person stepping over a threshold she'd been circling for years. The cottage listened. The rain held the house steady with its hands. I dropped a thin white shard of sea glass into the jar and watched it settle into the others. A quiet click that belonged to no one but me. New rule, I told the voice log, and could hear the smile in my voice. I don't apologize for protecting my home. Across the water, the bell gave a single, clean note. And the part of me that had been waiting for someone to grant permission understood what it had been missing. I had been holding my breath for a man who was no longer here to tell me to exhale. So I did. Then I read the boundary card one more time, let the words line up inside me, and slipped it behind the clear plastic of my wallet where my library badge used to sit. By late morning, the rain had wrung itself out and left the sky rinsed and hard. I set the binder on the dining table, then, on impulse, carried the sea glass jar in from the kitchen and set it in the center like a small lighthouse. If I had to look at Miles Caro across a stack of paper, I wanted the calm of something that didn't lie. They arrived in a staggered parade. Deputy Ruiz first, steady as yesterday. Then Cap Reed, hat in hand, smelling faintly of rope and sun. A woman from the county environmental office, Miss Green. All field boots and clipped sentences. Miles last, in a jacket the color of polite weather, with a man whose job title was probably relationships, because his smile tried to be one. Thank you for coming, I said, and meant it to the people who worked for the county. I nodded at Miles. We're doing this in the open. Quote, we appreciate transparency, Miles said, as if the word tasted like a vintage he'd chosen. I slid a 1-page cover across the table. Term sheet owner proposal. The bullet points were simple enough to explain without a lawyer in the room. Record conservation easement over the preservation area. Establish a time-bound access lease to navigable water with defined windows and no after-acquired rights. No staging on the property, no altered fixtures, all entries scheduled in daylight with county notice. Developer funds shoreline stabilization and marsh grass restoration before any mobilization. No trespass recorded and posted. Developer withdraws or corrects the UCC 1 and acknowledges lack of authority by third parties. The last line, my favorite, said, no signatures today, written comments only. Miles skimmed, then looked up with that pleasant, empty expression executives learn in training. This is creative. It's responsive, I said, to your Phase 2 realities and to my rights. Miss Green tapped the page with a blunt forefinger. If you're serious about stabilizing this shoreline and protecting the easement corridor, you'll like this more than you think, she said to Miles. Beat erosion now. You reduce your own headaches later. Cap made a low, satisfied sound in his throat. Ruiz stood with his notebook at parade rest, the way he does when he intends to remember every syllable. Miles tried another door. "We value good stewardship," he said, "but we typically partner through a property management framework that shifts the burden of day-to-day to experienced hands. You keep the enjoyment and we keep the risk. Win-win." "I can read a framework," I said. "Your framework opens gates without me. Mine requires a key." I could see his glance catch on the sea glass jar and the green key beside it, and for a heartbeat I was grateful for props that weren't theater. "We've drafted a friendlier access form," he offered, sliding a folder a few unnecessary inches. "Just preliminary so our engineers can." "No preliminary," I said. "Email only, paper only, daylight only. And only after you send a written withdrawal or correction of the UCC one filed under a trust Trevor does not control. You know that filing is noise. Remove it." Ruiz lifted his chin. "For the record, any entry without the owner's consent or lawful authority will be documented and referred." Miles's companion shifted his weight, the first crack in the composure veneer. "We're neighbors, Miss Ellison. We're not here to antagonize." "Then show me you can hear no," I said. "Show me you can build with constraints you didn't write." He smiled again, but it clicked as effort now. "Let's start with shared objectives. Atlantic Crest invests in communities. We're happy to fund marsh education signage, perhaps a small pavilion." "Start with shoreline stabilization," I said. "Start with an endowment for the library's disaster readiness program and a grant for Miss Green's team so they don't have to triage good science. Then we can talk about pavilions." Miss Green didn't smile, but her eyes warmed a fraction. "That would be the first smart proposal I've heard this week," she said to no one in particular. Miles folded his hands. "Assuming we address the paperwork confusion you mentioned, would you be open to a non-binding letter of intent, purely to mark that we're moving in good faith?" "Letters of intent are the gateways you later swear were doors," I said, and felt the line seat itself like it had been waiting for my mouth. "Send comments on the term sheet. All red lines in writing. I'll respond after council reviews." The room did that quiet thing good rooms do when a ground rule lands. The cottage made its tiny house noises. The jar held its calm like a bowl holds light. For the first time since the cedar box, my pulse and my voice matched. Footsteps on the porch cut the moment in half. I knew the cadence before the knock, a rhythm that practiced being casual. Trevor came in fast with an apology already loaded. "Traffic," he said to Miles, then turned to me with a look so earnest it would have fooled the version of me who apologized just for breathing. "Mara, I should have told you sooner. Cole made a verbal promise. He didn't want to put it on paper because he hated fighting, but he wanted the cottage integrated. He told me to handle it." The room tipped a degree, not because I believed him, but because the old reflex to accommodate flared, and then, blessedly, died. I set my finger on the key so the words, "Steady," "Verify," "Sign," pressed back. "Then you'll have no trouble producing the writing," I said, voice even, "because anything real enough to bind me is real enough to be recorded." Trevor flushed, glanced at Miles for rescue, then smiled the way boys smile when they think charm will make a lock. Forget it's a lock. "Let's be reasonable," he said. "No one wants this to get complicated." From the road came the hard scrape of tires on crushed shell, and that sharp, dusty hush when an SUV brakes too close and too late. The sound moved through the porch boards and into my bones like a weather change. Whoever had just arrived planned to make reasonable do new tricks. The door hadn't finished swinging when Maya stepped through it like weather compact, certain, a canvas tote against her hip. She didn't bother with greetings. She set a slim recorder and a stack of printed emails on the table, then looked at Trevor the way a lighthouse looks at a storm, unimpressed. "Before we talk about anyone's verbal promises," she said, "let's put some paper and sound on the table." Sienna slipped in behind her, cheeks wind-flushed from the dash over the causeway. She lifted 2 fingers in a hello and set a USB beside the recorder. "Corner booth footage," she said to me. "Angles are clean, audio on the phone call is crisp." Maya pressed play. The diner's air filled the room silverware, coffee pour, the bell over the door, then Trevor's voice, easy as cream in soup. Yeah, I'll get her to sign the access found my family representative hat. Finder's fee as discussed. A beat. Another man, the one in the safety vest Sienna had clocked. "Soon as the paper's down, we'll stage on the marsh side. She won't even notice. Trevor again. Lower. She'll notice the check. The cottage made a small sound then. A pop in a board. The way houses do when they hear something true and ugly. Miles didn't move. His smile turned off like a switch. Maya slid a second sheet across to Ruiz. "This is the UCC one filed by Ellison Family Trust," she said, tapping the header. "No authority, no POA, no court appointment, and no present interest in fixtures. We'll file a UCC 5 correction and serve notice disputing the filing. Deputy, I'd appreciate a CAD note that the homeowner has reported a fraudulent or unauthorized financing statement used as leverage for access." Ruiz's pen was already moving. "Copy. I'll log that now." Trevor tried for indignation and landed on shiny. "This is taken out of context," he said. "Finder's fee is just a way of saying administrative costs." Sienna let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "You negotiated administrative costs in my booth into your phone." Miles cleared his throat. The corporate baritone was gone. What came out was careful. "It appears we were operating on incomplete information." He turned slightly toward the county rep. "Atlantic Crest will withdraw any involvement pending clarification, and of course we will correct any clerical filings done by third parties under our umbrellas." "Not clerical," Maya said, mild as rain. "Instrumental." Trevor looked to Miles for rescue and found only a man reversing. His face did a slow, baffled rearrangement. "I'm family," he said to me, softening his voice, reaching for the old door he always used. Cole wanted. "No," I said, calm enough to hear my own pulse, steady enough to like it. "Cole left me a key, not a broker." I slid the term sheet back to the center and turned it so the bullet points faced Miles. "Withdraw the UCC. Put in writing that you recognize no one had authority to represent me. Then we can discuss shoreline stabilization and a time-bound access lease under the easement's limits. All daylight. All in writing." Miles nodded, the way men nod when they've relearned how gravity works. "We'll respond in writing," he said. "No one from our side will set foot on your property until we have a signed agreement and all filings are corrected." "It is not taken it." "Good," Ruiz said, fast enough to make it official. Trevor's mouth opened and closed like he was searching for a script and finding none. "You're blowing this up," he said. "We had momentum. There is a lot of money on the water," I said, "and on the record." I picked up a smooth green shard and let it fall into the jar. It landed with a clean bell-like kiss against the others and settled. Something unclenched between my shoulders. Maya gathered the prints, stacking them into a neat, prosecutable geometry. "We'll send the filings before close of business," she said. "And Trevor, any further attempt to act as manager of a trust you don't control becomes its own problem. Consider this your chance to stop digging." He gave me one last look, the kind men save for women who have stopped apologizing. It slid off me like rain off tin. Miles stood, smoothing his jacket back into its weather. "We'll be in touch," he said, and for once the sentence didn't feel like a warning. They were halfway down the steps when Cap came in from the porch with salt in his beard and the kind of smile I've only seen on men who've brought proof. He laid a color printout on the table, toned blues and grays, a high view of our marsh with tiny white teeth set into the channel like a zipper pulled wrong. "Fresh satellite still," he said. "Fellow I know at the harbor office texted it 10 minutes ago. Those aren't crab pots. They set marker buoys at 2 a.m, off the public line and nosing your easement corridor." The buoy bell out on the water answered itself with a lower note, as if the sound could nod. The room narrowed and sharpened at the same time. Paper had just beaten theater. Now the water was sending its own paper back. If they're placing their markers in the dark, what exactly are they planning to tow in before sunrise? Night came hard and quick, the way it does after a day that spends itself. We ate Sienna's diner pie at the table like a truce offering, the jar of sea glass haloed in the lamplight. When the house finally exhaled and everyone left Ruiz with his notes, Miss Green with samples of marsh grass to show the budget people, Cap with a 2-finger salute, I was alone with the binder and the quiet. It felt less like being left and more like being entrusted. I should have gone to bed. Instead, I opened the crawlspace box again, looking for something I didn't know how to name. Beneath the tide charts and plats, Under a layer of manila that smelled like basement and lemon oil, I found a heavy envelope sealed with the kind of wax you only see in movies or wills. Mara in Cole's block print, and beneath it, smaller, almost shy, when they stop pretending to be polite. It turns out grief is a key if you use it right. I cracked the seal with my thumbnail and slid out a single page and a thumb drive taped to it. The page was simple. One sentence, then a signature the muscle memory of my eyes recognized before my mind did. I, Coleman Ellison, place a conservation easement deed in escrow to be recorded upon any trespass, unauthorized staging, or obstruction of the marsh access described in Book 214, page 93. Sienna Brooks shall act as co-trustee of the community fund established to maintain said shoreline and support the county library's disaster readiness programs. Underneath, his name. Beside it, a notary stamp as tidy as a finished room. The thumb drive held a short video labeled, "If They Set Piers." Cole, in his work shirt at our old dining table, eyes clear, no hospital pallor. "If you're watching this, they got bold," he said, like we were already in the middle of a conversation. "Don't argue with noise. Record the easement. Record the no trespass. Tell Sienna it's her fund, too. She won't let anyone push you off the dock. You don't owe anyone a fast answer to anything you didn't ask for." For a minute I just sat there with the key in one hand and the page in the other, both weight and permission. Then muscle memory of a different sort took over. I scanned the deed. I texted Maya. Found escrow easement plus co-trustee clause. Recording trigger equals trespass divided by staging divided by obstruction. Buoys equals obstruction? She called before I finished the question. "Send it," she said. I heard her keyboard start to sing. "We'll package it with CAP's satellite still and the booth audio. If they touch that corridor, we record tonight. 2 filings, conservation, easement, and no trespass with the county. Also a letter to Atlantic Crest and their shell company that says, in Latin and English, knock it off." "Co-trustee is Sienna," I said, and the smile in my voice surprised me. Cole picked her. "Smart man," Maya said. "It keeps the benefit local and the narrative clean. Homeowner and community steward, not lone holdout." I called Sienna. She didn't say anything for a long beat. Then, "That fool knew I'd bite anyone who threatened you," and I heard her grab her car keys. By morning, the filings were stamped and real in the way only ink and book and page can make real. Maya slid copies across the table like winning cards. Conservation easement deed recorded. No trespass recorded and posted. UCC 5. Correction filed. Disputing authority and identifying the bogus secured party. A letter to Atlantic Crest with more case citations than I could count, and an elegant last line that translated to, "Your urgency is not our problem." Trevor arrived anyway. Color high. Words too. He started with familiar, "We can fix this if you just," and pivoted to aggrieved when I didn't give him a foothold. He threatened exposure and family reputation, and a lawyer whose name I recognized from billboard benches. I didn't ask him to sit. Maya waited for him to breathe, then placed a document in front of him with that courtroom calm that makes grown men discover posture. "Here's your fork in the road," she said. "Non-disparagement and restitution for any sums taken under the guise of administrative costs or finder's fees. In exchange, we don't forward the booth audio and your self-styled manager filings to the agencies that would enjoy them. You have 24 hours. After that, we stop being neighborly." He tried to find whichever expression moves a woman like a magnet. It didn't exist anymore. He signed. Miles didn't come in person. He sent an email that read like a man relearning the alphabet. "Atlantic Crest acknowledges the owner's exclusive authority. We are withdrawing the prior filing and any involvement of third parties. We propose funding shoreline stabilization immediately and establishing an endowment for the county library's disaster readiness. We request discussions regarding a time-bound access lease consistent with the recorded easement and environmental regulations. We will not enter without written consent." He attached a draft with numbers that didn't insult me. I printed the email and set it next to Cole's one-sentence deed. Then I did something I would have considered petty a month ago. I walked out to the edge of the porch, read the no trespass aloud to the marsh like it was a psalm, and taped a laminated copy to the post where the morning light could find it first. By afternoon, Miss Green had a crew measuring for shoreline stabilization, and Cap stood at the end of the dock with his thumbs in his belt loops like a man who'd bet on a tide and won. Ruiz drove by slow enough to tip 2 fingers without stopping. Sienna took the co-trustee binder in both hands and held it like some women hold babies, light and fierce at the same time. We sat on the steps and looked at the water the way you look at a friend who once scared you and then taught you something. "Cole did good," she said finally. "He did," I said. "But I did this part." The buoy bell answered with a single note that traveled straight through the porch boards into my chest. I put the green key back on the table, next to the jar that had grown heavier in the best way, and said the words that had stopped being a performance and started being a ritual. Email only, paper only, daylight only. Then, softer, for me, my signature, my timeline. Maya poured coffee like a ceremony. "2 more details," she said. "We'll record a cease and desist specific to any staging in the easement corridor and finalize the access lease only after the UCC correction posts to the state index, and we receive a written admission that Trevor's acts were unauthorized. I'll send red lines." "Then," I said, "we sign." "Then you sign," she corrected, smiling. "On your paper, on your terms." We didn't pop champagne or dance on the porch. We did something better. We made copies. We backed up files. We put the originals in a fireproof box and labeled it with the kind of librarian precision that would have made the old me roll her eyes and the new me breathe easier. At sunset, the water went the color of old coins, and the air smelled like rain 3 counties away. Much later, alone again in the quiet, I lifted the sea glass jar and felt its weight. Every piece I'd dropped in to mark a line held the light and gave it back. I set the jar down, hung the key on a small nail by the back door, and stood there long enough to hear the bell out past the Spartina make its low, satisfied sound. We're not finished. Tides don't do finished. The videos on Cole's Drive have names I haven't clicked yet. The developer will redline my redlines and call them compromises. Some days grief will still try to drive. But the cottage knows me now, and I know what to do when strangers schedule my signature. I keep my hands steady. I verify. And then, only then, I sign. Somewhere between the last email of the day and the first chorus of Night Insects, my phone buzzed with a new message in the clean inbox. Subject, Community Fund Welcome. From a name at the company I never expected to see there. I stared at it, surprised into a laugh that sounded like relief and warning at the same time. If they're offering a seat at the table, I thought, what room are they trying to build around it next? Boundaries aren't a barricade, they're a door that opens only when you're present. That's the heart of this story. Calm beats chaos, paperwork beats performance, and your signature belongs on your timeline. When pressure shows up with a smile, remember the green key. Steady. Verify. Sign. You don't have to be loud to be powerful, you just have to be clear. Here's how to apply it this week. Quietly and firmly. Write your boundary card. Wallet size. Email only. Paper only. Daylight only. My signature. My timeline. Use 3C when someone rushes you. Calm your body. Collect IDs. Authority in writing. Confirm next steps by email. Run the 7 questions before you sign. Who is the real counterparty? Do they have authority? What are access, easement, fixture terms? Will it be recorded? How does it end? What's the consideration? Where is dispute venue? Start a family incident log date. Who? What? Where? Exact words. Documents exchanged. Follow-up. Loop in one trusted witness, friend, neighbor, officer, or legal aid clinic, so you're never negotiating in the dark. If any of this touches legal terrain, move slowly and document. This is not legal advice. Think of the sea glass jar. Each small, steady choice makes a clear pile you can hold up to the light. And when fear rings like a buoy bell, let it be a reminder, not of danger, but of direction. If this resonated, drop one sentence you'll say to yourself on a hard day, your personal boundary line, in the comments. Want the 1-page family incident log plus 3C card? Download the PDF in the description and save it to your phone. And if you'd like more stories that end in quiet, lawful wins, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. May you sleep tonight on boundaries you chose and wake knowing they'll hold.